At my brother's wedding, my dad stood up during the toast and said, "This is what a real son looks like, not the failure sulking in the back." The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at me. I forced a smile, but they had no idea what I was about to do next. I, 32M, sat in the back corner of the reception hall, nursing a glass of whiskey that had gone warm in my hand. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor as I shifted my weight, trying to make myself smaller, more invisible. My brother stood at the center of everything, as he always had, his arm around his new wife, both of them glowing under the soft amber lights strung across the ceiling. The room smelled of expensive catering and champagne, the kind of wedding my parents had always dreamed of throwing. Just not for me. The best man finished his toast to scattered applause and laughter. Then my father stood up. I should have known something was coming by the way he'd been drinking all evening, by the way his eyes kept finding me across the room with that familiar mixture of disappointment and contempt. He raised his glass, and the room quieted down to listen. That's when he said it. The words cut through the comfortable hum of celebration like a knife through silk. He gestured toward my brother with pride, called him a real son, someone who had made something of himself. Then he turned, looked directly at me, and mentioned the failure sulking in the back. Every head in that reception hall swiveled in my direction. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, all of them staring. My mother looked down at her plate. My brother shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I forced a smile, lifted my glass slightly in acknowledgement. Let them think whatever they wanted to think. But inside, something cold and calculated clicked into place. They had no idea what I was about to do next. The thing about being the family disappointment is that people stop paying attention to you. They write you off, stop asking questions, stop wondering what you're really up to. And that invisibility, that complete lack of interest in my life, had given me the perfect opportunity over the past 3 years to build something they knew nothing about. While my brother climbed the corporate ladder at our father's firm, while he bought his luxury condo and drove his German sedan, I'd been working 16-hour days on a tech startup. No family funding, no nepotism, just me and 2 partners from college grinding it out in a cramped office space that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. 6 months ago, we'd been acquired by a major corporation. The number had 8 figures in it. My cut was enough to retire on, but I wasn't the retiring type. I kept it quiet, didn't tell my parents, didn't broadcast it on social media, didn't show up to family dinners in expensive clothes. I drove the same beat-up sedan, lived in the same modest apartment, and let them all continue believing whatever narrative they'd constructed about my life. My mother still asked when I was going to get a real job. My father still made comments about wasted potential. The wedding reception continued around me. I stayed for another hour, made polite conversation with relatives who looked at me with pity, endured the sympathetic shoulder touches from cousins who thought they understood. Then I slipped out early, drove home, and started making phone calls. My father's commercial real estate firm had been struggling. I knew this because I'd made it my business to know. The business he'd built over 30 years was hemorrhaging money, weighed down by bad investments and an outdated business model. He'd been too proud to adapt, too stubborn to listen to anyone who suggested change. My brother, his golden child and vice president, had only made things worse with a series of disastrous property acquisitions over the past 2 years. They were in debt. Serious debt. The kind that keeps you up at night and makes you snap at your family during dinner. The kind that makes you drink too much at your son's wedding and say things you might regret. Or maybe he wouldn't regret it. Maybe he meant every word. 3 days after the wedding, I sat in a conference room with my lawyer and my financial advisor. We discussed the purchase of my father's company's debt from their primary lender. It wasn't cheap, but I had the resources. More importantly, I had the motivation. The bank was happy to offload a troubled loan. The paperwork took 2 weeks. I didn't make my move immediately. I waited, watched, let them scramble and stress, and try to figure out solutions. My brother called me once during this period, asking if I wanted to grab a beer. I told him I was busy. He didn't push it. We'd never been close, not really, despite sharing the same childhood home and the same parents. He'd been the favorite since we were kids, and I'd been the afterthought. My mother called too, her voice tight with forced cheerfulness, asking if I was okay after the wedding. She'd noticed I left early. I told her I was fine, just tired. She didn't apologize for what my father had said. She never did. Her strategy had always been to pretend uncomfortable things never happened, to smooth over the cracks with pleasantries and subject changes. For weeks after the wedding, I called my father's office and scheduled a meeting. His secretary sounded surprised to hear from me. I rarely contacted them directly. I showed up on a Tuesday afternoon in a tailored suit I'd never worn around them before, carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my old car. The look on my father's face when I walked into his office was almost worth the price of admission by itself. Confusion, maybe a flicker of shame, definitely surprise. He asked what brought me by. I told him we needed to discuss the future of his company. He bristled immediately, defensive, asking what I could possibly know about running a business. I sat down without being invited and opened my portfolio, slid the documents across his desk, explained, in simple terms, that I now owned his debt. All of it. Every penny his company owed. And I was calling it in. The color drained from his face. He picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning through them as if hoping to find some mistake, some loophole. There wasn't one. My lawyers had been thorough. He asked how this was possible, where I'd gotten this kind of money. I reminded him that he'd never asked about my work, never shown interest in what I was actually doing with my life. Failures don't warrant attention, after all. His jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he tried anger, demanded to know what I wanted. I told him the truth. I wanted him to sell the company. Not to me. I had no interest in running his failing business. But to sell it, use the proceeds to pay off the debt, and then retire. The alternative was bankruptcy, public and humiliating, which would destroy not just the business, but his reputation in the industry he'd spent decades building. He called me names then. Ungrateful, vindictive, cruel. Said I was destroying the family legacy out of spite. I sat there and took it, let him rage until he ran out of steam. Then I asked him if he remembered what he'd said at the wedding. He went quiet, looked away, told me he'd had too much to drink, that I was being too sensitive. I stood up, told him he had 30 days to make a decision. Then I left. My brother showed up at my apartment that evening. He'd clearly been sent by our father, probably with instructions to talk sense into me, to appeal to family loyalty or brotherhood or whatever emotional lever they thought might work. He stood in my doorway looking uncomfortable, asking if we could talk. I let him in. He tried the reasonable approach first. Talked about how the business supported the family, how our father had built it from nothing, how destroying it would hurt our mother too. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I asked him if he'd stood up for me at the wedding. If he'd said anything when our father publicly humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. He looked at his shoes, said it wasn't the right time to make a scene, said he figured we could talk about it later, privately. I told him that his silence had been a choice, just like this was my choice now. He got angry then, said I was being petty, that I was acting like a child holding a grudge. I reminded him that I was offering a way out, that bankruptcy would be much worse for everyone involved. He asked what I wanted from him. I said nothing. I didn't want anything from any of them anymore. He left looking defeated, and I felt nothing watching him go. Update 1. The deadline approached. My father tried everything. He had my mother call, crying, begging me to reconsider, saying I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family had been broken long before this. She'd just chosen not to notice. She hung up on me. Other relatives got involved. Aunts and uncles I barely spoke to suddenly had opinions about my choices, about family forgiveness and letting go of the past. I stopped answering calls from numbers I recognized. My father's lawyer reached out to my lawyer, trying to negotiate terms, extensions, anything. I instructed my legal team to stick to the original agreement. 30 days. Sell and pay, or face bankruptcy proceedings. With 1 week left, my brother showed up again. This time he looked worse, like he hadn't been sleeping. He sat on my couch and told me everything. How bad the debt really was. How much their lifestyle had been built on borrowed money and false confidence. How our father had taken out personal loans guaranteed against the business. How my brother's own finances were tangled up in the company's fate. He asked me what it would take to make this go away. I told him the truth. Nothing would make it go away. This wasn't a negotiation. He asked if I hated them. I said no. Hate required caring, and I'd stopped caring somewhere around the 100th time I'd been dismissed, overlooked, or compared unfavorably to him. He cried then, actually broke down in my living room, admitting that he'd always known our father favored him, that he'd felt guilty about it sometimes, but never guilty enough to say anything. He apologized for the wedding, for all the years of standing by while I was treated like I didn't matter. I appreciated the apology. Told him so. But I also told him it didn't change anything. Some things break beyond repair. On day 29, my father agreed to sell. A competitor had been circling for months, waiting for the price to drop. They got the company for less than it was worth, but enough to clear the debt with a little left over. My father's legacy sold off to keep him from financial ruin. The family exploded. I was disinvited from Thanksgiving, from Christmas, from every future gathering. Cousins I'd grown up with sent me angry messages. My mother left a voicemail calling me dead to her. My brother stopped trying to contact me altogether. I sat in my apartment and felt the weight of it all, the finality of burning every bridge. And then I felt something else. Relief. Update 2. 6 months later, I bought a house. Nothing ostentatious, just a comfortable place in a quiet neighborhood with good schools, though I didn't have kids. I was thinking about the future, about what I might build that would be mine. I ran into my mother at a grocery store. She saw me first, and I watched her face cycle through emotions before settling on cold politeness. She asked how I was doing. I said fine. Asked how she was. She said managing. We stood there in the produce section, two people who shared DNA and history and almost nothing else. She told me my father had taken a job as a consultant, that they'd downsized to a smaller house, that my brother was job hunting, that his wife was pregnant. She delivered this information like updates about strangers, her voice carefully neutral. Then she asked if I was happy with what I'd done. I told her I was at peace with it. She nodded slowly, said she hoped it was worth it, losing everyone. I almost let her walk away, almost let that be the end of it. But something made me stop her. I asked if she remembered my high school graduation. She looked confused by the question. I reminded her that I'd graduated valedictorian, given the speech, earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university. I asked if she remembered what my father had said at dinner that night. She frowned, thinking. I filled in the blanks. He'd spent the entire meal talking about my brother's baseball game that afternoon, how proud he was of the winning catch, how the scouts from college teams had been there watching. My achievements hadn't rated a mention beyond a brief congratulations. Her face tightened. She said that was different, that I was always fine on my own, self-sufficient, that my brother needed more attention and support. I asked her if she understood what she'd just said, how that sounded. She got defensive, said she'd done her best, that being a parent was complicated. I told her she was right about one thing. I was fine on my own. I'd had to be. And maybe that was her and my father's greatest gift to me, teaching me early that I couldn't rely on them for validation or support. It had made me stronger, more driven, more independent than I might have been otherwise. She left crying. I finished my shopping and drove home and didn't feel guilty. The thing about revenge is that people expect you to feel empty after, to realize it didn't solve anything or make you feel better. But that wasn't my experience. I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Free from the constant weight of trying to earn approval that was never going to come. Free from the exhausting cycle of hoping things would change while knowing they never would. My business continued to grow. I started a new venture, this time in renewable energy. Hired good people, built a culture based on mutual respect and recognizing talent regardless of who someone's parents were. Made it a point to notice the quiet ones, the people working hard in the background who might be overlooked. I dated someone for a while, someone who came from a similar background of family dysfunction. It didn't work out romantically, but we stayed friends. She understood in a way most people didn't. Update 3. A year after the sale, I received an email from my brother. He'd found a new job, decent position at a smaller firm. His daughter had been born healthy. He didn't ask for anything, didn't try to rebuild bridges. Just wanted me to know he was managing, that he thought about our conversations sometimes, about the things he could have done differently. I wrote back, told him I was glad things were working out. Meant it too. I didn't hate him. Never had. He'd been a product of the same system I was, just on the favored side of it. That wasn't his fault, even if his choices afterward were his responsibility. We didn't become close. Probably never would be. But we established a distant, cordial relationship. Holiday cards, occasional emails, acknowledgement of each other's existence without the weight of family obligation. My father, I heard through the grapevine, had a minor heart attack. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to scare him. My mother called from a number I didn't recognize, caught me off guard when I answered. She asked if I would visit him in the hospital. I thought about it, really considered it. Part of me wanted to be the bigger person, to show I could forgive even if I couldn't forget. Another part of me remembered every single moment of feeling invisible, unwanted, insufficient. I told her no, said I hoped he recovered, that I wished him well, but that I wouldn't be visiting. She called me heartless. Maybe I was. Or maybe I'd just learned to protect my own heart since nobody else had bothered to. He recovered. Life went on. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. The honest answer is complicated. I regret that it had to happen, that my family was so fundamentally broken that the only way I could feel whole was to break it further. I regret that my parents never figured out how to love both their children equally, that my brother and I never got to be real brothers. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Don't regret showing them that the failure sulking in the back had more power than they'd ever imagined. Don't regret choosing my own peace over their comfort. 3 years out now, I'm doing better than fine. Built a life that doesn't require anyone's approval but my own. Surrounded myself with people who see me, value me, respect me. Invested in myself in ways my family never did. The wedding toast still echoes sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. But it doesn't hurt anymore. It's just a reminder of who I used to be, the person I had to kill off to become who I am now. The person who smiled and took it, who hoped things would magically change, who kept trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given. That person is gone, and I don't miss him at all.